architectural multidisciplinary practice, medium-sized. My interest today really is in the area of organization and the changes that are necessary to organizations, to architecture, within design practices. We understand, we've heard a lot about the technology, but the whole people side is really of interest to me as a 65-year-old crustacean. I spend a lot of time mentoring people, understanding skill sets, and helping to evolve them. So I'd like to turn maybe to Maria first. And I know Maria's very well known as a lighting designer, and I just wondered, what changes does she see happening within her industry in terms of interaction with multidisciplinary teams? What kind of people do you need now in your business? What skill sets? How do you see that evolving?
Well, I guess as everybody else, we're seeing a lot of need in terms of data analysis now, which we didn't as much before, even though lighting is still a science and artful craft as well. We're seeing the need more and more to have data and to bring data into our analyses and understand not only the aesthetic part of lighting, but also the technical part of it, and understand it much better. As we all know, in the construction industry, project schedules are just getting faster and faster, and for us to be able to evaluate different options when we go through a design, for these massive projects, we can't really do it all by ourselves. We need to have, or rely, let's say, on data and all the amount of data that's out there for all of the studies and possibilities that we have. So we do need people that understand how to harvest that data, how to use it, and how to create an output that meets the needs of the projects, as an example.
And apart from data, the skill sets people need, do you sense that they need broader perspective, new strengths? How do they interact with other team members? How is the data communicated efficiently? Could you touch on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. The previous presenters talked about critical thinking, and that is absolutely necessary because you cannot just trust what the computer spills out, right? You need to understand that it is correct and it will function appropriately. And then, as you mentioned, communicating that to the rest of the team and going through the whole coordination in itself also requires a whole other set of skills, which has to do more with the human side of things. How do we present this data and this results to clients? How do we make them understand such a complex thing as lighting, which is, in certain cases, people think it's very simple and very straightforward, but in many cases it's not. And so we need people that are able to explain it in simple words as well.
Okay. And would you see in time, for example, the whole impact of lighting on physiology, on mood swings? We talked about that, buildings being adaptable, buildings having the intelligence to sense people's mindsets, and the lighting being adaptable to that. And, I mean, is that something you've started to look at, or...?
Oh, I've been looking at it for a very long time. And yes. I'm very happy that you touched on that because my presentation later on today will actually talk about it a little bit.
Very good.
Yeah, but absolutely. I mean, this is part of the science that I'm referring to, that we can no longer see lighting just as an aesthetic add-on to architecture. It also has an effect on ourselves and our moods, as you said, and our health.
Sure.
And we're seeing it have an impact on people more and more. Yeah. As we rely more on electric lighting.
Very good. And I think we're probably going to see consultant psychologists, physiologists in design teams in time. Doctor, can I turn to you and ask, in terms of the curricula within your university, and how are you adapting the learning piece in this evolving world? I mean, what changes are you instituting? How is education going to evolve? Licensure? How will all of that evolve?
So, thank you for inviting on this very important topic of skill sets, because as universities, we have to always bridge the gap between the academia and the industry. And we always look at what the industry is looking for, what skill sets. And today morning, while I was also talking to a lot of people here and preparing some notes, I would group all these skill sets as 5 key areas. First is attitude, and most of them said that's the first. How do you have the right attitude? And as university, how can we really make that difference? And that is maybe through mentorships, connecting to people, because they are all natives of the digital world. They all believe in only texting, and as Maria always says, connecting only through digital space, but how do you communicate and collaborate? So working in teams is very important to give them projects to understand and have the social connect. The second is adaptability, to adapt to the newest technologies. So we have to look at technical skills. What is something that they can also learn? Because by the time you learn, something new comes. So how do you address that in the curriculum? Then the third is analytical thinking, and that is going to be a biggest challenge, because how do you have the thinking process? The AI can make your work efficient, but the common sense comes from individual. So that is very important.
And I think, Doctor, as we look towards the future, we're going to be reliant on Generation Z, as you talk about, who are very computer literate and perhaps lacking in some of the soft skills that are needed around communication, collaboration. Clearly, technical ability is needed, but how do you, let's say, develop and evolve the broader skill sets around communication, collaboration, and how is it? I mean, it would strike me that the ability to learn and change and adapt is key, quite apart from any technical knowledge.
So apart from technical knowledge, I think it's important that they are interacting a lot and talking to each other. And there is always a kind of, an overview of what is going to happen in future for them. So it's important that they do also an internship that gives them the practical approach, interacting with the industry and each other.
Yes.
And do a lot of discussions, because engaging discussions can really have brainstorming. The social connect, and there's something called as an 18-hour campus that's like a new trend for the socio-cultural skills. Yeah. And how do you develop those through communications?
And I noticed the University of Leeds have introduced a new curriculum in the last month where the training is 50% architecture, 50% engineering. And I suppose my thought process was that young architects now are effectively going to become curators of design. We've talked about the need for emotional involvement, a human being, but there's also this need for curation and the ability to essentially direct and bring focus, So, can I ask you, Dr. Rana, on the energy side, as was some of the same questions, architects increasingly are becoming sustainability experts. They're broadening their knowledge. What changes are you seeing within your university, and what is your focus around people, skill sets, training?
I think a lot of change now has happened in academia to respond to what's happening in terms of the new requirements of the generation now, learning requirements from the generation, as well as how we are adapting to the industry and market needs. So I can see that the teaching is so much now adapting to that. Like, we're no more now relating on exams as a way to, I would say, to assess a student, because the idea of memorizing now is not what the market is needing. And the idea of how can you reach the information is very open. So you can easily find that information, but it's about how would you process that information? How would you make use of what you find? That's the main point now. So I think a lot of programs have been also offered to the professors to learn about teaching. Learn about teaching, not only to teach, but learn about how can you respond to that. So there's the PG Cert programs and all of that thing that is focusing on how the students are learning and the different approaches and the different assessment mechanisms and how are you responding to that nowadays. I think this is really crucial. So when I'm reflecting back on how I was taught and how I was assessed, and also the previous generation, it's very different. It's very different, especially in architecture. Like when I'm even comparing architecture with other disciplines, like for example, medical disciplines, a lot of changes, a lot of difference has happened specifically in architecture to respond to that thing. I think we're we're working, I would say, in parallel, or we're trying to catch up that generation requirement. But I think we're almost there. The focus, as Dr. was saying, is about critical thinking. That's the most important part, other than just finding the information. Like you can find the open book exams and all of that. This is not the issue. It's about processing the information, making use, and collaborating with your colleagues to be able to work in that environment.
And do you see architects becoming and developing greater skill sets in environmental science, for example? The need for the architect as the curator to have a broader knowledge. I mean, up until now, I guess, up to reasonably recently, we have relied on specialisms, but architects need to move in the direction of that specialism, right?
Yeah.
And from the very beginning of a project, you need to be aware of your likely impact as a designer.
Yeah. So I think, yeah.
So the question really is, do you see in your training, is it mostly architects, or is it, do you educate specific sustainability gurus, if you like?
Yeah, so first, I think the curriculum and the way how the university is now working is completely different. So for example, so I'm from Heriot-Watt University, I'm teaching in Heriot-Watt University. So what's happening now, like where the architecture program is sitting, it's sitting within EGIS, which is Energy, Geoscience, Infrastructure and Society School. So you can see actually it's not only about the design school, or it's not about only an engineering school. It's something which requires already to be working with society, to be working with petroleum engineering, to be even working with civil engineering. And we're always focusing on that. Like since from year one, when the students join, they always have that in the first and second semester, some of these collaborative projects that they are doing with other programs. So it's like a courses that they are taking, not only focusing on architecture, but it's having a lot of different schools and programs within that thing. So they collaborate with their colleagues, not only also in Dubai, but we're always also collaborating with our other schools in Edinburgh and Malaysia. So the students have that idea of collaboration from the very beginning. Then we return back to revisit this in year 3, in which we're always asking the students for the first week in year 3 to have a collaboration project. So this is where the design studio and the civil engineering and the architecture engineer work together for 1 week. And then we ask the industry practitioners to come and judge these projects. So I think this is usually the first shock for the students to understand, oh, it's not this is what I want, or this is what the civil engineer has said, or this is what the architect needs. They begin to, as a mock-up exercise for just 1 week to understand what's happening, and then they work based on that thing later.
Okay. Very good, very good. And if I could turn to you, Drew, I mean, you're a man who's won several awards, very strong design background, and you're very embedded in the AI revolution. What interests me as an elderly practitioner is how this has impacted your organization as an architectural practice, a multidisciplinary practice. How have you had to kind of restructure, and what kind of impact has it had on for example, middle management within an architectural practice? Do you see greater empowerment happening of younger graduates because they have the, how would I call it, the shelter of systems that are compliant, code compliant? So from a very early stage, architects should be able to, if you like, get more heavily involved in design because the processes have inbuilt technical safeguards. How has your structure evolved as a practice?
Yeah, in the last year, we've seen quite a dramatic change. It opened a lot of doors. The ability for AI to essentially do things that we didn't do before, or did it faster than we did it before. And at first, we had ChatGPT, which was bringing, the ability to prompt words. That was great. Then we had Midjourney, which was prompting images. But the ability to integrate this into architecture is where I came in as the lead of the AI strategy at OBMI, is we started saying, this is what it's capable of doing, how will this shape what we do? And ultimately, within roughly a year, it shaped everything completely differently. The way we present is different, the way we create is different, the way we communicate is different. So ultimately, one of the biggest skills that we've had to create, or let's say foster, is this ability to adapt to this increasingly fast speed of producing ideas. How do we share it with the client? How do we produce meaning? Because again, personally, I've generated like 250,000 images. They don't have meaning by default. So from the human point of view, we still have to give meaning to the outputs that are being generated. For the new generations that are coming into the field, ultimately the biggest thing is, do you have common sense? Do you have the ability to adapt to change? And can you communicate meaning from these generated ideas?
Okay. And has it, in a sense, if you were to look at the profile of a traditional practice, where you had, obviously you've got commercial leadership, you've got all that, but you have a director, you traditionally maybe a number of associate directors working, and then a group of team, a number of people beneath each, a BIM platform at the base, which communicates with other sub-consultants. Have you seen that structure change? And how empowered have this younger communicative group of architects become within your organization?
Yeah, I mean,
it's less hierarchical. I suppose what I'm trying to say, it must be less hierarchical.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Before it used to be top down. Obviously, the more educated, the more experience you had, the higher up you go. But now we're reaching a stage where essentially the younger you are, the more ability you have to connect with these AI tools are giving you like multiple steps up to reach a level of understanding that some other, let's say, higher position will be able to do. But I'm noticing a lot more kind of flatlined collaboration across the firm.
Yeah.
And I predict that even in the future, I don't know how far, maybe 4 or 5 years, that almost every single person could operate almost as their own firm.
Yes.
So as long as you have the ability to delegate tasks and understand what needs to be done, it's hypothetically possible that you will be operating a firm almost completely autonomously.
And I think Paul touched earlier on what does it mean for smaller firms. It strikes me that if people are able to work in this method, people with specific skill sets, maybe smaller firms, can contribute at a very high level, remotely, into very large projects. Do you see that as an emerging possibility?
Absolutely, yes, I do. With AI, I mean, obviously right now I would say it's still in its infancy. We're maybe like 3 years deep in terms of like, being effective. But within the next 4 years, I mean, it keeps multiplying. Obviously, it's an exponential growth curve. But it won't matter how big or the size of the firm. It will matter the idea and the meaning behind the idea. Who has the best taste, the best idea, and the best way to communicate that idea? It won't matter how big or small you are at that point.
Very good. And how do you cope with mentoring? because people are working remotely. You're going to have elder lemons like myself with ideas, perhaps. How are they mentored remotely? How do you imbue them with those skill sets, perhaps, that you learn over 40 years?
Part of it's about providing the right tools, the tutorials, making sure they have all of the resources they need. But ultimately, for example, with the AI strategy at OBMI, it's about embedding a mindset. Once you have that mindset, you're at least halfway there. And mentoring is obviously just a matter of time. If everybody's in the same circle of understanding, it's easy to reach out and become mentored by your peers.
Okay, very good. And Nicola, if I could turn to you as an interior practice designer, how has AI impacted your symbiotic relationship with architects? I mean, how is it making life easier, or is it putting you under even greater pressure?
So for us, obviously, it's a practical thing. We are trying to build these amazing ideas, these buildings, these interiors. We need to translate it from the screen or the virtual to the reality.
Yes.
And what we're really struggling with at the moment is, with the new generation, is the soft skills, the resilience, the communication, the understanding of, okay, there's something amazing being designed here, but how do we actually translate that to build, and how do we communicate that, and how is it understood? Because there's a huge information gap when, okay, architects or designers design something amazing, but it has to then be understood by the person building it. And at the moment, you still need a person to help build it. I'm not saying in the future that you might not, but for the time being, we still need that personal interaction. So we're really struggling at the moment with finding people who have that grit and determination inside them to actually bring things to reality now. We're also finding it difficult to find people who, want to be on site and build either buildings or fit out projects, because they want to. You can't work remotely when you're building a building, right? You need to be there. You need to be controlling it. There's this expectation that, I need to be at the gym by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I need to fill up my wellness cup, and well, unfortunately there's deadlines out there, and the construction industry at the moment for us is still a place where people need to be present and understand what is going on. They also need to be able to communicate very clearly and understand the expectations, and we're finding that very difficult with the new generation that's coming through, that there's still that practical, you need to be there and be present and work hard. There's still an element of you need to work hard.
And in your business, as an interior designer, there's a huge amount of coordination with multiple suppliers.
Yeah.
You're coming in at the end of a project under tremendous pressure. Mm-hmm. How are your suppliers and subcontractors responding to the AI challenge?
I think at this point, we're still very traditional in the way we approach procurement and supply chain. At the moment, we're seeing it's much more upfront from an AI point of view and from a design point of view, but from a practical, a simple raising a purchase order and arranging a delivery, there's efficiencies in there, but it's still the best form for us is someone picking up the telephone. The amount of people that just don't want to pick up a telephone. Have you phoned this person? I sent them an email. Pick up the phone and speak to someone.
Yes.
Oh, I sent them a WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Pick up the phone, meet them, have a coffee with them, have an in-person meeting. We can actually all meet in person. It doesn't have to be online now. And sometimes the results are better when people meet in person rather than online.
Yes.
And you get someone's full attention from that. So we're finding that there is efficiencies there, but at this point, for managing even consultants and supply chain, that you still need that person to do that coordination, and those soft skills are needed to manage that process.
I suppose one of my focuses would be around delivery, implementation, and it strikes me that, you know, very many contractors and subcontractors simply don't have a digital transformation plan.
No.
And a lot of them don't have the processes in their workflows. So it's very traditional, and it's still face-to-face, and it's meetings, and sometimes very competitive, you know, in terms of, you know, how things are managed. Do you see technology helping in any way to kind of streamline these processes, or do you see subcontractors any day soon who are fully embracing technology?
I think there's definitely supply chain are embracing it, but depending on the size and scale of the company and the specialism for the company. So they're definitely embracing technology. For us, for example, we have sort of 4 online internal process platforms that we use. We are now looking to integrate that to one. Even just take your planning tools and programming. You know, you've got a tool that will allow you to develop a program, but someone still has to manage that program, and someone has to be able to communicate that program, because not necessarily everyone can read that program. So you've got an amazing tool that can develop the construction program, but somebody has to be able to translate that to all the consultants, subcontractors, every stakeholder in the project, and be able to monitor and drive that. So the program can monitor progress, but can the person reading that understand the information that's being given by that program? And that, for us, is where the human soft skill comes into the process.
Very good. I mean, one question I'd put out to you as a group of people is your experience around industrialized design and construction and its kind of relationship with AI technology, and have you much experience in terms of delivering projects and or componentry that is built off-site? Is that something, I mean, presumably, just coming back to you, Maria, you do design one-off light fittings, specialist light fittings, all of that. How does that all kind of happen now?
So when we have to design one-offs, like you say, it requires a large amount of coordination, and now we're talking about multiple people. There's a particular example that I can remember. We had to design this color-changing chandelier for a client, and it was a very particular shape, and it had to function in a very particular way. But the part that was the most complicated of the entire process was coordinating how the massive chandelier would attach to the ceiling. And we had to coordinate with architects and engineers and the construction team on site to understand how the panels were going to fit into the space. And the space was actually half built by then. The ceiling was in place, so we had to cut into the ceiling. So the process starts with an idea, of course, like any process does, and an approval from a client. But from that point on, it's a massive amount of coordination on a technical side with manufacturers, on the construction side with the site team, on the architectural side, to understand how the piece is going to fit in the space, as well as engineers and how are going to power it, where the data is going to come from. So yes, AI can certainly help there, but like you say, the human factor is still there and very much present.
And very much more so, as was mentioned earlier, with the iconic design elements, whether it's a light fitting or a building.
Yep.
But AI will and is already stepping into the process side. I mean, would anyone like to make any other points? Because this conversation is around skill sets. I don't know whether anybody would like to come in and anything in particular on your minds that you'd like to talk to in terms of your own experience. I'm sure Paul would like us to maybe wind us up or ask if there's any questions.
Well, I mean, there's something that was mentioned by Nicola, which I thought it was interesting, right? And also, in a way, by the panel in general, we're talking about soft skills of being critical in the design industry. And it's not just about being able to pick up the phone and talk, but it's also understanding, as Nicola said, that you're entering at the very bottom of the basin. And even if you have these skills, right, and you're able to understand AI and computational science much better than your elders, there's a whole lot of experience that is lacking from just being in the business. And
Yes.
I feel like many young designers come into a practice and they think that just because they know all of this, they're ready to just handle a whole project all by themselves. And I think it's very important that younger designers understand that there's a whole lot of on-site experience and project experience that is going to be very useful to learn on the job, and it will take time.
And I do agree with Maria that that can be overwhelming of the information and the tools that are there.
Yes.
And sometimes you get carried away as what's there, what's available to you, and you can just forget the main essence of what you're doing.
Kind of information overload, if you wish.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does happen. So many new things keep coming.
Doctor, would you like to make any further observations? Or?
I'm also always thinking of, we should also keep in mind, AI is a tool. It's not instead of us, like human are the one who make the AI, so it will, every now and then, it will require an update. So that update would be our task. How are we going to inform the AI to continue working? We are the one who would observe what is happening and what is the current trends, what do we need to respond to, and then based on that, we're communicating it to the AI so that it will help us. So the AI is an assistant for us. It's not like it can save time, it can save effort, things like that, but we're the one who make it to do that. So I think that's the most important thing, that we all need to think about AI from that point of view, as well as the new generation should be focusing on how can they direct the AI in that, or make use of it in their work. Yeah.
And I suppose one other question, Drew, augmentation versus replacement. I mean, we've touched on that. I mean, my view would be that the architect will always be that curator and will become more powerful and will not be replaced. I don't know whether you want to touch on that.
I mean, to say that AI will replace us, I heard something recently that was actually quite inspiring. He said that AI is not going to take over, but we may give it all the power because we're becoming so reliant on it. I can't say for certain that we wouldn't be replaced in the next 5, 10, 20 years, but what I can say is I do know that there's going to be a transition to something. So this collaboration is not necessarily optional, it's more of a must, where we have to understand that the AI can do certain things that we cannot. But it ultimately is an augmentation to what we are doing and what we already know. So we still have to train ourselves as architects, as whatever profession we are, and ultimately that AI is a +1, or it's an additional layer on top of what we're already doing. We can't evaluate it properly if we don't know what we're supposed to know in the first place. So critical thinking is very critical. Obviously, soft skills, it's a very collaborative profession. So if we cannot inspire, collaborate, communicate with our clients, ultimately we're not going to make it very far in the profession with or without AI. So ultimately, we need to make sure that we're the best we can be, and then using AI to continue to augment, again, for as long as possible. I don't know what the transition will be to, but if hypothetically it was in the next 20 years where AI are extremely intelligent and can handle the whole process, fine. But that doesn't mean that the humans won't be able to also, let's say, contribute to society. There will always be ways for humans to contribute regardless.
Commit in these circumstances to lifelong learning. You know, it's continuous professional development will become even more accelerated. Can I ask you, Nicola, do you want to make any further points from, the interior side, which I've always seen as the real pressure point in a project?
I think just we need to make sure that the next generation or people transitioning into the industry understand the reality. There's already, and there's always been, and I'm talking from personal experience, a massive jump between when you leave education and go into the real world. We need to make sure that we don't lose touch with reality and that the next generation understands what this industry looks like, whether architecture, interior design, construction, project management, and make sure that we fill those gaps moving forward. And I think that's really key and critical, that that gap doesn't get better and that it's collaboration. So although we're developing in the AI world, we need to keep in touch with reality at the same time.
Very good. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I don't know, Paul, whether you
Thank you very much, Jerry. That's a fantastic panel session. Huge round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.